Thank you very much, Anthea and Ben and Simon, who have set this meeting up. And thank you all for coming to this historic occasion. This is the first ever People's Primary in the United Kingdom. It's an invention of our constituency. This is something... But it's not staying within our constituency, because other constituencies around the country, which have got the same problem as we have picked up the model and are now running with it as well. So congratulations to the founders of this scheme, which seems to be on the cusp of taking the country by storm. Now, we're not pretending, any of us here, to be politically neutral. We are here to evict the Tory candidate. For 99 years, Totnes and South Hams has been, or whatever it was with border changes, boundary changes, has been a Conservative constituency, despite the fact that in recent years, the majority of people living in this constituency have voted for progressive candidates. This is a classic example of what the Democracy Campaign Compass calls a progressive tragedy, where most people don't want a Conservative to represent them, but the Conservative ends up representing them. And this is an artifact of our first past the post political system, which deprives us of genuine democratic power and genuine democratic engagement. And what this primary process is doing is putting us back in control. We are taking back control, but in a real way. And it's allowing us, the people, to push aside the political machines to get what we want. The political machines which have ensured that we're stuck with this dysfunctional political system, which makes so many of our votes wasted and invalid. And the great design, the beauty of this proposal here, the primary system, is, and it's really simple in concept, but complex in ramifications. The beauty of it is that it gives decision-making power back to the people. It is a genuine people's primary. And I have to say, I am inspired beyond words to see all of you queuing in the rain, to see the number of people who've been desperate to get into this meeting, to see the fact that everyone who's got a ticket appears actually to have turned up, which is extremely rare in political meetings. This shows that already at least one of the aims of the campaign is working, which is political re-engagement. So thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to briefly tell you about the structure of the meeting, and then we're going to kick off. So first of all, we're going to hear from the two candidates who we have with us. And remember all the time that if you want to put Labour down as one of your choices, you are fully entitled to do that. You've got three choices in your voting preferences, and Labour can be one of those. You can rank them wherever you want. But we have two candidates, Lib Dem and Green, as you know, here to give us their pitch and to answer your questions. So each of them is going to give us a short personal statement, who they are, what they stand for, and then a slightly longer statement on why they should be the one to displace the Tory from our constituency. Then we're going to give it back to you to have a little moment, a few minutes of reflection, talking to each other about what you've heard before opening it for questions and answers. Now, I should warn you, I am a severe chair. If you start making comments rather than asking questions, if you start rambling, if you are not succinct, I will cut you off, metaphorically, at least in the first instance. I will also ensure that our candidates here stick to the point and are short and crisp and concise, as I'm sure they both will be. And then we'll have a couple of housekeeping things before the vote, and then the voting will happen at the end. But of course, you won't hear the results of it until all eight primary meetings, is it 7 now? All 7 around the constituency have taken place, and we've gathered up the totality of the votes. So We're going to start off I spoke to the candidates at the beginning, and we're going to kick off with Caroline giving us a short personal statement about herself and why she's so great. Off you go.
Well, firstly, can I just say thank you all for coming. I'm Caroline Voden, and I live here in Totnes. I'm very proud to have lived in this constituency since 2007. I am the daughter of a climate scientist and a social worker. I'm a former journalist, a charity CEO, and I was a member of the European Parliament. In 2019, I was elected by the Liberal Democrats to lead the party in Europe until Brexit. I'm here because, like you, I don't want to be represented in Westminster by a Conservative MP for a minute longer. I want to see this inept, cruel, corrupt government drummed out of power so comprehensively that they will get lost in the political wilderness. And if we can get PR, then hopefully forever. Brexit is what made me get involved in politics, and I'm still angry about it. So I'm stepping up to try and change the political narrative of this country, to lead a movement of people that will end a century of Conservative MPs here in South Devon, and to work with others to build a fairer, greener, better Britain.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And now Robert is going to tell us briefly about himself and why he's so great.
Certainly the former. My name's Robert Bagnall. I'm your Green Party candidate. I'm 53, father of two. My family and I moved to Devon almost exactly 10 years ago now. My background is in the public and charity sectors, in specifically central government, health regulation and higher education. I currently work as a freelance consultant, mainly within government, within Westminster, departments and agencies, helping them deliver public services within increasingly constrained budgets. I'm also working with one of the world's oldest animal conservation charities. Away from work, I am also a science fiction writer. If you have a copy of any of the best of British science fiction anthologies, there's a better than 50% chance of me being in there. I am also hopefully soon to start training as a citizens advice volunteer advisor. Everything Caroline said about getting rid of the Tories, I agree with, and I've gone over my minute, which is all I was allocated and all that I've practiced for. So I also look forward to this process displacing the Tories now and forever. Absolutely sign up to that.
Thank you both, and thank you for being so concise. Now, the real meat of the matter. I shouldn't say that as a vegan, but the essence of the matter, which is the question of why each of these candidates believes they are the best person to displace the Conservatives in this constituency. So again, we start with Caroline. You've got up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So we're all here today with one aim in mind, to choose the candidate who is most able to beat the Conservatives at the general election, and to elect for the first time in actually 101 years a non-Conservative MP for South Devon. If we had PR, we wouldn't need to be here, but we live in an imperfect world with an undemocratic voting system, so we're just trying to find a way to make it work. I'm going to share with you why I believe that I am the only person who can beat Anthony Mangnall at the general election. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am, because I want you all to have the confidence that if you do elect me later this year, you will know what I believe in and what my values are, because they are the values that will guide me as an MP and influence the way I vote. There's a photograph somewhere of me in a pram with a sash round me, which says "Vote Smith." I was campaigning before I could speak for my dad, who stood and became the youngest Labour councillor on a very Conservative Berkshire County Council. We moved to Scotland and I grew up in a politically aware household where my mum raised money for Oxfam and UNICEF, and my dad brought PhD students to Edinburgh from the global south to study science with him, climate science. As a journalist, I worked in the Balkans during and after the Yugoslav war, and I witnessed at first hand the terrible consequences of that conflict. I then lost my husband, Nick, to cancer in 2003. And a couple of years later, I moved here with my 2 little daughters and raised them alone for 8 years until I met Stuart and remarried. The girls are now in the midst of the broken housing system in London, and we are dealing with evictions, damp and mould as a regular feature of family life. After I lost Nick, I ran a charity for young widows. I launched and ran my own business in Totnes, and I was the chief executive of Devon Rape Crisis and resigned from that last year to campaign full-time. So my experience of life and work in a variety of roles has taught me the power of community, of mutual support, particularly when things are tough, and how important it is for us to strengthen the bonds of society. I'm really tired of living in a world where politicians drive division, foster hatred, and stoke fear, and where policy decisions are ultimately made by rich donors. I don't believe it needs to be like that. For me, successful politics is about building community and empowering the weakest in our society to live a decent life and to have a voice, eradicating the glaring inequalities in wealth and power that divide our country. So my priorities and those of my party are the basics. We want to work to fix the NHS and our broken public services. I want to ensure everyone in South Devon can live in a secure, safe and warm home. I want to ensure taxation systems are fair so that everybody pays a fair share, taxing income from wealth, closing loopholes for the rich, a guaranteed basic income. And of course, ensuring that we do everything we can to address the climate emergency. So zero carbon energy, restoring nature, clean, green public transport, home insulation, climate-friendly farming, and so much more. Like my Lib Dem colleagues, I will support the Climate Ecology Bill. There's a lot more too. I'm sure we'll discuss much of it later on this afternoon, but just for now, I want to focus on how we're going to beat the Conservatives. So I gave up my job last May, and I've been working on this campaign 6 or 7 days a week since then. I live and breathe it. And because of all the work that I and my brilliant team of volunteers have already done, our party has upgraded this seat because they know that it is now one of the most winnable Liberal Democrat seats in the South West. That means more support, more resources, and more help. We are the only party that is taking this seat seriously. I know that I can win, but winning a general election takes a huge amount of work. There are 70,000 voters in South Devon and 39,000 doors. We have to speak to as many people as possible to convince them that change is possible and who they need to vote for to make it happen. We've already spoken to over 11,000 people, and we have delivered leaflets across the whole constituency several times. We're out 5 times a week with a growing team of door knockers. We've been building my name recognition for 18 months, and we have the backing of a paid party campaign manager who's been posted in the Southwest to help us get over the line. So what comes next? We step it up a gear. We knock on more doors, we deliver more leaflets, we use social media, we find more poster sites. Make no mistake, the Conservatives have increased the spending limit for the election to £35 million for one reason, because they know that they are the only party who can raise and spend that kind of money. They will not give up without a fight. This is going to be a really tough election campaign. And the only way we can counteract that is to work together and to work hard to build an unstoppable campaign from the ground up. The Tories win because they stick together, and we need to learn from that. Okay. I'm already doing everything I can to make it happen, and I really hope you will join me.
Okay, right. Okay, you've got 5 minutes, Robert.
Thank you.
What's your pitch?
I've been knocking on doors, listening to voters, and what they are telling me is the #1 priority for this election is to fix our broken public services. Whoever comes to government will need to find tens of billions of pounds, and the other parties are not being clear on where that money is coming from. The Green Party say the money is there, the money has always been there, if you have the political will to get hold of it. Our slogan is fairer, greener, and we cannot deliver the green agenda we want to, decarbonised energy, better insulated homes, public transport that's good enough to get people to choose to come out of their cars, even in a rural setting, without dealing with fairer. And to me, top of that agenda is financial fairness. Wealth inequality in this country is shocking and worsening. We have almost 4 million people living in deprivation, including 1 million children. Deprivation means not having sufficient income to manage a basic standard of living. At the other end of the scale, the 350 people and families on the Sunday Times rich list, and you could get them into this room pretty much, have a combined wealth of around about £750 billion. That is enough to run the NHS, the 5th largest employer on planet Earth, for about 4 years. What's true nationally is true locally as well. Average wages in South Devon are below not just national averages, but regional averages. But house prices and rents aren't. And if you look at the health and well-being indicators that are symptoms of deprivation and poverty, they are as bad in some parts of this constituency as anywhere in the country. We are where we are because of political choices. Choices like a tax system that taxes the wages that you get from going out to work at up to 45% plus national insurance, but the money your money makes, if you're lucky enough to have money to start with, at a maximum of 28% and no national insurance. Political choices like tax loopholes and political choices like one-off schemes that slosh money around and that public money around and then dump it into the laps of the people who need it least. And I'm thinking particularly of the Freeport here, which only the Green Party unambiguously opposes. So what I'm asking you is, if you, like me, think that wealth inequality is making us all poorer and is getting in the way of addressing the climate emergency, then I would like you to stand up with me and with the Green Party, because it is only the Green Party that is unambiguously saying, let's equalise tax rates so that it doesn't matter where your income comes from, whether it's work or investments, it gets taxed in the same way. The Green Party is the only party, at least on this platform, who are saying they'll close tax loopholes like non-dom status. And it's only the Green Party that has put forward specific plans for a modest tax on wealth above £10 million. Together, those initiatives will bring another £46 billion a year to solve the problem of broken Britain. But they will only stop wealth inequality getting worse. To turn the tide, the Green Party propose a universal basic income, which is very different from the Lib Dems' guaranteed basic income proposals. It's a small, regular payment that everybody receives. In our 2019 manifesto, it was £89 a week. And as such, it will benefit those who need it most. People on no incomes, including unpaid carers, people on low incomes in areas that South Devon has so many of, like agriculture, tourism, as well as retail, care, other frontline workers, as it will replace most means-tested benefits. It gets rid of layers of bureaucracy, gets rid of the indignity of means testing, and also removes those cut-offs and thresholds and poverty traps. And by putting more money in everybody's pockets, we can go out and support our local high street. Not every high street in this constituency is as thriving as Totnes, and support our local businesses.
Could you start wrapping up now?
Yeah, I commend this to you as something that could be transformational for Britain and for South Devon, and I'd like you to vote for me as People's Champion.
Thank you very much to both the speaking candidates, especially for sticking to time. very grateful. Right. So we're going to have a couple of minutes for you to think about this, reflect on what you've heard, have a little chat among yourselves if you want, before we start the questions and answers. So over to you. Thanks, everyone. We're going to resume now. Now, the questions, as I mentioned before, they need to be short, sharp, to the point, not comments, please. We've chosen 9 to start off with, and we've chosen these on the basis that they tend to amalgamate questions which many people have asked in advance. And so we've chosen 9 questioners really to represent the most common issues that people have brought up. After that, we're going to open it up to the rest of you. So could we have our first question, please, from Roberta Fuller? Thank you. Wait for, I think there's a microphone coming your way. Yeah. And when you get the microphone, hold it close to your mouth and horizontally, please. Thank you. No, I don't think the candidates haven't been told, have they?
Not specific questions, no. Broad areas.
Okay, thank you. We have an ageing population and a mountain of debt relative to GDP. Are there genuinely any efficiency savings out there? Is your party brave and honest enough to talk about increased levels of taxation, and from whom would they be collected?
Robert, could you start us off with that?
Yeah, sure. This is on. Well, I kind of refer you to the core of my speech. You know, what we're talking about is funding not just, care, but all the public services, from the potholes to care to you name it, the speed of processing asylum seekers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. More money is needed in the system. Are there efficiency savings? There probably are, but I mean, one of the features of the public sector is that it's got so little sort of oil in the machinery that it's running inefficiently, but you don't create efficiencies by cutting more out, you create efficiencies by investing in it. So, one of the things that I'm absolutely passionate about is the transformational power of universal basic income, as I said. So in the care sector, you've got to, there's the care sector where people are employed and, care is paid for. Then you've got a big, unofficial, informal care sector where you have unpaid carers. UBI really transforms them, because a lot of people who are caring at the moment, even children who are caring for parents, and getting UBI into that sector is transformational. I mean, one of the key aspects of the Green Party policy is to put the social care on the same status as the NHS. So in the same way that people have a right to care, to the NHS, not on the basis of what they can pay, but on the basis of need, the Green Party would fund free social care based on need, not on the ability to pay. So, yes, I think there's a great deal in the Green Party policy and agenda to address the care crisis within Britain.
Thanks, Robert. Caroline?
Yes, so I think your question was about whether the party's brave enough to talk about changes in the tax system. So there are several things that our manifesto is not published yet, but there are several things in the pre-manifesto that I can refer you to. So we have said for quite a long time that we would have a substantial and long-lived windfall tax on the oil and gas companies. So it wouldn't just be a one-off thing, it would last for a year. And we would tax income from capital. Income earned from capital investments in the same way that tax was, that people's income is taxed, right? We would also reverse the Conservatives' tax cut on banks. And there is about £35 billion a year, which doesn't come in because of tax evasion, mainly by wealthy people who find ways to avoid tax, and we have said that we would close those loopholes. So lots of different ways that we would try and boost the tax take. But I think also it's a question of productivity. And I would just like to go back to what I said before about Brexit. I think it was extremely damaging for our economy, and the effects of it have been quite disguised by COVID. And the government will always say, well, of course, COVID and the war in Ukraine. But we're coming out of that now. And if you look at what other countries are doing, our economy has been seriously hit by COVID, by Brexit. And, you know, I talk to business owners quite often when I'm out door knocking who say that they are really struggling with the red tape and the bureaucracy, and it's making doing business harder. And I think if we want to boost the economy and, you know, make it more productive, have good jobs for people so they can earn decent money and the government will get tax, then obviously we need to increase productivity. And for me, joining the single market would be the best way to boost productivity in the country.
Thank you, Caroline. No, for now, we're not going to come back on them because we've got a lot of questions. I beg your pardon?
Even if there's factual inaccuracies.
Look, I just need to get through as many questions as we can for now. Sorry. So next question from Charles Smith, please. And again, wait for the mic. Thank you very much.
Where do the candidates stand on the first past the post system, electoral reform, and reform of the House of Lords?
Thank you. Another nice, concise question. Caroline, start us off.
So we've campaigned for proportional representation for 100 years, I think. It's in our DNA, you know, that's why I'm a Liberal Democrat. I joined the Liberal Democrats for two reasons. One was because I'm passionate about PR, and the other is because of their position on Brexit. We did have a policy for reform of the House of Lords when we went into coalition, but our coalition partners decided that they didn't want to, it was in the coalition agreement, but they ripped that up and it never went forward. So our policy on that was that 80% of the House of Lords should be elected and bit by bit over 5-year terms. So absolutely, we desperately need electoral reform in this country, and we need democratic reform. One of the things I'm really passionate about as well is changing the funding of political parties, because when you have massively wealthy donors who can basically give the Conservative Party as much as they like, then they're buying power, and I think that's fundamentally wrong. You know, the Green Party, the Liberal Democrats, can't even dream of raising that kind of money. So I think that's a really important factor in making our country more democratic.
Thank you, Caroline. Robert?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for a question to find some differentiation between the two parties, this probably isn't that great a question. You know, the Green Party is also passionately committed to proportional representation. There's a number of models of proportional representation. We're agnostic on which specific one. But yes, any move away from first past the post, and we've got a policy of an elected House of Lords as well. So, yeah, you know, our electoral system is broken. We do need better representation, and representation that doesn't drive people towards strange decisions. When you go out and ask people what they actually want, you know, what would you vote for if any party has an equal chance of winning? And twice as many people say Green as Liberal Democrat. And I understand the reasons for, you know, the bluff and double bluff that leads people to vote for particular ways tactically. But, you know, in terms of differentiation between our two parties' positions, there might be some difference in detail, but yes, proportional representation, let's get it as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Right. The next question is from Michael Cooper.
Thank you. What changes would the panel like to see within the food system? That's across from production to consumption, and notably, how would the candidate or the candidate's party deal with the hegemony of the supermarket?
Thank you very much. Robert?
Yeah, I mean, food, we're asking farmers to, farmers and fishers to do a difficult job, which is provide food security, and certainly in the case of farmers, to you know, protect our environment. So we will invest in farming. Obviously, I'm speaking without our manifesto having been published, but certainly the figures from the 2019 manifesto, we were looking to invest £1 billion into farming R&D, and then a lot of other things on top of that. One of the figures that, I mean, I know there is a Liberal Democrat figure of investing £1 billion into farming as a whole. What we want to do is move from a model of intensive industrial scale agriculture to agriculture which is good for the planet and good for people and producing healthy food in a sustainable way that doesn't rely on chemical interventions. I mean, the fact that the government have reeled back on EU regulations on a variety of herbicides and pesticides, allowing neonicotinoids and all of that, I think is absolutely appalling. But again, I suspect that Caroline will completely agree with me on that. In terms of the hegemony of the supermarkets, it's about giving farmers greater say and also, again, you know, universal basic income, allowing people to make healthy choices over food so that they can influence the market more. That is absolutely vital. I mean, the Green Party approach to everything is to say, what is the decision that benefits quality of life more than profit? And food and the quality of food is central to our country's health. You know, we're being driven towards eating cheap, ultra-processed food, which makes people ill and puts strain on the National Health Service. So, you know, when our manifesto is published, I suspect the investment promised is probably less than what the National Farmers Union is asking for, which I think is 4.2 billion. I think it begins with a 4. But I think it'll probably be I can't remember what the number was, 2.6 billion or something like that in 2019. It'll be roundabout there. But, you know, we want to invest in farming that is encourages biodiversity and is healthy for everyone.
Thank you, Robert. Caroline?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with Robert that we need farmers to farm in the most climate-friendly way possible. I did an event in Kingsbridge a few weeks ago with Anthony Mangnall and Henry Dimbleby, who wrote a food strategy for the government. He was asked to write a food strategy for the government, and when he presented it, the government didn't like what it said, so they chucked it out. And you know, it's a vast topic, food. I mean, we did actually spend the whole evening there talking about food. So I'll just try and sum it up very, very briefly. I think part of it is about farming. Part of it is about people having the wealth, the money to buy decent food. And we can see that obviously they can't. People are buying nasty, cheap food, and it is damaging the nation's health and driving up obesity rates, which then has a massive impact on the NHS. So it's a huge problem. I think that there are two things. One is supermarkets. I absolutely think we need more control over the way supermarkets relate to farmers. And I went to an event in Westminster, which was a debate prompted by a petition that Guy Watson started about supermarkets being fair to farmers. So that's about sticking to the contracts they've made with farmers at the beginning of the growing year, rather than just letting them down and saying, we don't want your stuff anymore, paying the prices they've agreed to pay, and paying a fair price, because I think it's the one sector which probably needs more control. You know, we all need to eat. Food is an absolutely fundamental for the country. And if farmers are not being paid a fair price, then they're just going to give up. And we're seeing farms all over the South Hams being sold and turned into the most incredible properties, because farmers just can't make a living from it anymore. And that is a serious worry. So I think we need much stricter controls around supermarkets. And public procurement, I mean, our MP has actually done some work on this, that, you know, we need to change the public procurement legislation so that schools and hospitals are buying local food and supporting the local food network. My colleagues in the Lib Dems at South Hams District Council are doing a lot of work around the food chain in the Southwest, and looking at in the South Hams, and looking at ways in which we can make locally produced food more available and more affordable for local people. And the Liberal Democrats also have a land and sea use framework. So it's a national framework which looks at the country as a whole and sort of looks at the way the land is being used and says we need X% for food production and Y% for nature restoration and rewilding. And I mean, I don't know what George's opinion of that is, but basically having a proper overview of the country so that we have areas where we can really promote the things that we need. Part of that is food, part of that is nature restoration, and so lots of things in that question. But yeah, it's really, really important that we address it.
Thank you, Caroline. We've got a question from Sarah Dingley. Yeah. Microphone coming.
Okay, thank you. We've all heard about what's called bed blocking, causing problems in an already overburdened NHS. Would your party consider taking social care away from local authorities and integrating it into the NHS? And if you did, how would you fund it?
Thank you very much. Another nice, concise question. Caroline, start us off.
Thank you. As far as I know, we don't have a policy to take social care into the NHS. I think my view would be the NHS is got quite enough to deal with at the moment without having to absorb social care as well. But I know that the integrated care, health and social care boards are looking at it as more of a whole. And I think it absolutely needs to be looked at as a whole, because what happens in the social care sector has a direct impact on what's happening in hospitals. If people can't get out of hospital, then they're bed blocking, like you say, other people can't get in. So care is a really big deal for our party. Some of you may be aware that our leader is a carer for a very disabled teenage son who needs 24/7 care, and he also cared for both his parents as a child. So he has had a life of caring and totally understands caring. We have various policies. We would raise the minimum wage for carers. We passed a bill in the House of Commons to introduce some paid leave for carers, because obviously if more people are able to care for their relatives at home, then it helps free up, it helps relatives get home from hospital so they can be looked after at home. I mean, I feel very strongly that we have damaged our care sector with Brexit. I'm really sorry to bang this drum. I feel like it's quite repetitive, but we need people working in the care sector. We've lost a lot of those workers. We've made it much more difficult for people to work in that sector. We're now the government is now changing the law so that people in the care sector can't bring their families over here. That's going to deter people from further afield coming and working in the sector. It's an absolute mess. And it's been the poor relation of health for so long that no government has really wanted to grapple with it. It's massive. And as the older population gets bigger, the care question becomes huge. But I think it's very unfair to discriminate between, for example, dementia and cancer care. So, I've been through the cancer journey and I know how amazing it was. Didn't really have a great ending, but the NHS did their best and it was there on tap the minute we needed it, with massive support around us. I now have a relative with very bad dementia and there's nothing. And, a very elderly relative who's caring for her husband and she should not be caring for him. And it's awful. So, I've seen it up close and personal. And I think, the dementia problem is something that we really need to get to grips with. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but.
Thank you, Caroline. Robert.
Yeah, I mean, again, as Caroline said, I don't think we have a specific policy, whether it stays within local authorities or goes out to the NHS or some separate body. But, the Green Party is clear and unambiguous that care should be put on the same footing as the NHS, with provision based on need rather than ability to pay. Like Caroline, I've been through that sort of, the journey with aging parents, and that sort of messy interface between the NHS and the care sector as well, and going through the battles of claiming that, this particular sort of care was medical rather than social need, therefore it gets paid by the state or not gets paid by the state. And, all the way through that battle, I was very conscious that we were, taking up the time of some bureaucrat when public funds are better spent not on having this battle, but on actually providing care. So, yes, I mean, whether we end up with a national care service or a national health and care service, I don't know, but that is the plan. And as I say, the Green Party have identified £46 billion, and that's before we start talking about a carbon tax and making the polluter pay as well. So we have identified a large lump of money to make a real impact on public services across the board, not just care and the NHS, but across the board as well.
Thank you very much,
Can you
Robert.
just excuse me for a sec? I need to get my scarf. I'm absolutely frozen. It's really cold in here. I thought it would be hot with so many people.
It is cold.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair enough.
Cold.
No. Thank you. Okay, a question here from Richard Sheffer. Do we have a Richard Sheffer? Oh yes, at the back. Thank you.
Polls consistently show that over 80% of the electorate support a change in the law to allow assisted dying of the terminally ill. If elected, would you vote to support such a change to allow assisted dying with appropriate safeguards?
Thank you. And I just want to say to everyone, thank you for these very pertinent and topical questions. So start with Robert now.
Yeah, straight question, straight answer, yes. And I've put my name down on that. There is a poll, not a poll, a petition at the moment, which I think is doing the rounds. Just to follow on from the last question and parents and end of life care, I can absolutely see how it would allow a dignified death and allow people to choose their own time. I think as a society, we value length of life quite often over quality of life. I'm on the same page here as the Green Party, so I'm speaking for myself and for the party. So, it's good we align, but if the Green Party were disagreeing with that, I would still stand up for that because I absolutely see the sense in it. I respect people who say, as a matter of principle, they're against it, but I support choosing your own, having the right to choose your own way out.
Thank you, Robert. Caroline.
Yes, I do support it. I spoke to the charity that's working on this policy at conference in September. I think it's Liberal Democrat policy that we support it, but it would be a conscience vote for us anyway. And yes, with the right safeguards, yes, I support it.
Thank you, Caroline. Question from Suzanne Dennis.
What would your party do about the persistent pollution of our waterways and coastline?
Understandably popular question. Thank you. Caroline, kick us off.
Well, it's timely. I actually had a meeting yesterday afternoon with some senior management from South West Water, and we discussed what they're doing in this area. So the Liberal Democrat policy is that we would make water companies, we'd take them out of private hands and turn them into public benefit companies. So I don't think that is full public ownership in the sense of renationalising. Public benefit companies would mean that they are a not-for-profit set up, so they wouldn't be driven by shareholder value. I think it's completely obscene that You know, we pay, I don't know about you, but I think I pay about £900 a year for my water. And it really sticks in my claw every time I pay that bill. That how much of that is going to wealthy shareholders who don't even live in the UK. It's disgusting. We would also have a sewage tax on water company profits. We would ban bonuses for chief executives and much tougher regulation from Ofwat. I think, you know, part of the problem over the last decade or two is that the regulations, the regulators have not had any teeth and have not been able to control what's going on. I think this problem has really only arisen, it's become public since the pandemic because so many more people are swimming in the water and noticing what's going on there. I think that hasn't changed actually over the last, you know, for much longer than that, but we just weren't aware of it. There's much more visibility now about what's going on. And I know that South West Water are aware of it. They're working on it. It's going to take a long time. It's not going to be done as quickly as any of us would like, but it is definitely there on their priority list. And if elected, I will be working with them. I will not see them as the enemy because I think we all have to be in conversation. And I think we have to work together to find solutions. Just one other very brief point on that. There is no planning stipulation that developers have to upgrade sewers when they build new houses. So there's a big development going up on the edge of the constituency over towards Churston at the moment. I think it's 450 houses or something. By law, they don't have to do anything to upgrade the sewerage system. I mean, it is absolute madness, and this happens over and over and over again. So we absolutely need planning legislation to change as well to help with the sewage problem.
Thank you, Caroline. Robert.
Thanks. I think, Caroline, you ought to draft the Liberal Democrat manifesto, because when I read the Liberal Democrat pre-election manifesto, I think the key thing about water was some vague words about holding the water companies to account.
You clearly haven't read our latest policy.
I must have missed it. Maybe it is in reaction to the pre-election manifesto, because the Green Party will unambiguously bring privatised utilities back into public hands. Then we don't need so much regulation. You know, the likes of Ofwat and Ofgem and all the other Ofs, the Office of Rail Regulator, etc., etc. You know, if you had public services in public hands, you wouldn't need them, because you can privatise management and delivery of public services, but what you can't privatise is public service itself. As soon as you put a company out into private ownership, its primary imperative becomes profit and shareholder returns. So the majority of voters, even the majority of Conservative voters, want a long list of privatised utilities brought back into public hands. And the Green Party is the only party that will unambiguously do that and promise that. Then there are no profits. You know, there was a big cheer earlier for taxing the profits on energy companies. Well, if you bring the energy companies back into public hands, there ain't no profits, because it just goes back into the public purse. So, you know, regulators are there almost to make a dog meow, to try and get it to do something that it's not naturally there to do, to make a private company work for the public good. Well, the easiest way to do that, so that you can manage the pollution and make sure that it's acting, you know, in the interests of people and the planet, rather than generating material wealth and profit for shareholders, is bring the damn things back into the public hands. The majority of people want that. You know, when the majority of Conservative voters want that, you know something's gone wrong.
Thank you, Robert. Next question is from John Luscombe.
My question is,
hold it closer, thank you.
how will the candidates ensure that dental treatment is available to all under the National Health Service? I might just add that I myself have just been informed that my dental surgery in Totnes is no longer providing NHS treatment. And when I went to the NHS Find a Dentist website, I discovered that the nearest dentist taking on new NHS patients is in Southampton, 104 miles away from Totnes.
Robert, start us off on dentistry.
Yeah, as I said during my opening remarks, there's a whole plethora of issues with public services that no matter how you cut it, it's a matter of bringing more money to the table. After the Chancellor's autumn statement, the Green Party produced its own 10-point alternative plan, including, the last couple of points are about how you fund things, including the changes to the tax system, et cetera, that I talked about. A specific well, not a commitment, because it would be a commitment if we're in government, but what we would have been doing, increase the spending on NHS dentists by £1.5 billion. That's 50% of the total NHS dentistry budget, if I've read the statement clearly. So, if we had a Green government, there would be £1.5 billion extra going into NHS dentistry. So you don't have to drive to Southampton, or you don't get queues round 3 blocks forming in Bristol as soon as the dentist is spotted out in the wild.
Thank you, Robert. Caroline.
Well, very good question. And I think it's absolutely appalling that there isn't a single person in this constituency who can register now as a new NHS patient, because so many NHS dentists have gone. The Liberal Democrat policy is that we would increase funding for dentistry, but also that we would renegotiate the contract with the NHS, because what's happened is it's a very complicated model, and 20 years ago, it kind of worked, but even at the beginning, it wasn't great. And the Conservatives have known for a long time that the model was breaking down. Dentistry has become more complicated. People have higher standards for their dentistry. Many of you in the room will remember getting an old silver amalgam filling shoved in your tooth. They just don't do that anymore. So the contract has been broken for a very long time, and it needs to be renegotiated, because there are plenty of dentists out there who want to do NHS dentistry. One of the things I've suggested, which has come from dentists in the area, is that we should have children-only NHS contracts, so that dentists can offer children treatment on the NHS while doing private treatment for adults. While that could start tomorrow, and while the whole thing is being sorted out, that would at least give dentists a way to make enough money to cover their costs, but also provide nearly free dentistry for children, because with dental health particularly, it's really, really important that it starts young. And what is a tiny little filling in a child's tooth becomes a bigger filling, becomes a crown, becomes a complete whatever it is, root implant replacement thing later on, with all the cost and pain associated with that. So it's really important that children have good dentistry. And that is something that I have suggested. And my colleague in Dartmouth, Liberal Democrat councillor in Dartmouth, is working really hard with the Dartmouth dentist at the moment to see if we can come up with an alternative model that might work, with some kind of low-cost insurance model or something. But yeah, it's an absolute mess, and it's been ignored by the government, and it's very high on our agenda, and we've been shouting very loud about it, pushing the government to do something about it.
Thank you, Caroline. Question from Laura Priest.
Would you always slavishly follow the whip? What sort of issue would make you defy the whip?
Very nice question for putting our candidates on the spot. Thank you. Caroline.
Well, just to say that the Liberal Democrat whip doesn't work in quite the same way as the Tory whip. If you put 20 Liberal Democrats in a room, you probably have 21 different positions on any subject. So it's a bit like herding cats. So I think, yes, I would be very prepared to defy the whip if it was something I felt strongly enough about. I think probably a wealth tax is maybe one of the things that, if it was proposed by Labour and our party didn't want to support it, I think I'd probably be trooping through the yes lobby. So I think I am pretty much in agreement with most of the Liberal Democrat policy, but I think maybe on the economic stuff, I'm possibly a little bit too left-wing, more left-wing than the party might like. So that's where I might diverge a bit.
Thank you, Caroline. Robert.
Yeah, I think the idea of a green whip in Parliament is probably less tested than the Liberal Democrat.
It would be a nice situation to
It would
be
be a
in, though,
nice
wouldn't it?
situation to be in,
Enough
absolutely.
people to need to whip
Yeah,
them.
no, absolutely. It kind of begs the question of whether you're going to end up with a representative or somebody who is just representative of you. We're looking for somebody who is a representative of South Devon, and certainly the Green philosophy is to push decision making down to localities, as far down the pecking order as you can get. So the idea of defying the whip would be if there is an issue which voting one way would benefit South Devon and the party is heading in the other direction, but then again the party's direction is to respect localities and do what's best for localities. So there's almost a self-contradiction in there, but I'd be absolutely fascinated to find out in practice by being subject to having the green whip taken away from me. Let's find out when it happens.
Thank you both for excellent answers. Question from Graham Bennett. Wait for the microphone, please. Coming.
Being of a certain age, I wrote my question a long time ago, and you probably know better what it is than I do now. But I'll do my best to paraphrase it. Basically, each candidate by now will have heard a lot about the other candidate. So if we're going to ask you to act for us, what have you heard from your competitor that you would be quite happy to sign up with and take forward as well?
Thank you. That's another great question for putting the candidates on the spot. Robert.
Well, I've heard quite a few things from Caroline, as I said, which I don't remember reading in the Liberal Democrat pre-election manifesto, including a promise to equalise tax on earnings and income. And my recollection from the Lib Dem pre-election manifesto, it has some vague words about making it more similar. So I am absolutely delighted if between the pre-election manifesto and what appears whenever it appears before the election, it turns out the Lib Dems are stealing some of the Greens' policies and language and claims, because, I'm not, it's not a matter of seeking to have a Green government, but if we have a Green government that adopts all of the Green Party's policies and lines. I met a lady out on the street just out there a few months ago who said she was going to vote Labour in the hope and expectation that Labour drops all of its policies and adopts all the Green policies. And I kind of pointed out maybe voting Green would be a slightly more rational approach, but no, she was having none of it on the basis that Labour stood a greater chance. But, I don't think she will get her, well, certainly the latter part of her wish. But no, I mean, I think one of the great things about this so far, I mean, there's another 6.5 of these to go together, to go. I have a great deal of respect for Caroline. I think, as a politician, she's a wonderful politician. But the trouble with politics is it's a bit like horse racing. It's the horses that race, but the jockeys that give the interviews. And I much prefer the green horse that I'm on and its policies and what it's promising.
Thank you very much, Robert. Caroline.
What a great question. I think there's a lot of Green policy that I support. A lot of what Robert has said, I support. I do think actually our parties are quite aligned on a lot of it. I think probably we diverge most on the economic stuff, but I did read quite thoroughly into guaranteed basic income versus universal basic income. I would still come down on the side of guaranteed basic income because, frankly, I can't really bear the thought of someone like Rishi Sunak being given money for free for doing absolutely nothing. Well, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I said this at the beginning, and I think we need to kind of come back to what we're trying to do here today. I honestly believe that the nuances in what we all want from a politician, everybody in this room has less difference between them than what we see within the current Conservative Party, you know, from David Cameron to Suella Braverman with Lee Anderson thrown in there as well. You know, that is a vast difference in you know, approach to politics, and I'm sure there's loads of stuff they disagree on, but they're so good at sticking together because they know that in our first past the post system, the only way you win is to have this big coalition. So it's the Conservatives versus everybody else. And we spend weeks and months and hours debating the finer points of, you know, exactly where you put that threshold of tax on the rich, or exactly what kind of basic income you're giving people. I mean, basically what Robert and I both want is for everybody to be able to afford a decent life and to be able to buy good food to eat and have a house where there isn't water dripping through the ceiling, you know, and for children who are not going through a desperate mental health crisis and being told that they have to be suicidal to get any help from CAMHS, because there is no CAMHS, because there's no mental health service in this county. Devon's mental health services is absolutely at rock bottom. You know, so I really want us to just keep the bigger picture in mind and not get too fixated on the finer details of policy, because with the best will in the world, neither the Greens nor the Liberal Democrats are going to be running a majority government after the next election. So whichever of the two of us gets elected here, we will be backbenchers on the opposition benches, you know, making our voice heard and sticking up for South Devon and doing the work locally and being your representative in Parliament, but we will not be making government policy. So I think that's the most important thing, that we send someone to Westminster to represent us who is not a Conservative, and we have to think about which organisation has the strength and the ability and the capability to make that happen.
Thank you, Caroline. Now we have time for one or two spontaneous questions, and there's a hand gone up in the middle here. Keep your hand up so the microphone see you. Thank you. Coming your way. Yep.
Hi. How do you plan to reach and engage younger voters? And with that in mind, where do you sit on student loan repayment?
Thank you, thank you very much. Caroline, kick off on that one, please.
Well, reaching younger voters, it's a challenge. I think young voters have been completely turned off by a government that has done nothing for them for decades. You know, why would they be interested? They're never going to be able to afford to buy a house. They're riddled with debt before they leave university. You know, everything's miserable. They can't even bugger off and go and live in Spain because they're not allowed to anymore. So why should they care? You know? So I go to schools. I went to a school yesterday to talk to the sixth form. You know, I like to think that I can communicate well with young people. I've had quite a lot of practice at home. I think we need to make politics lively and interesting and fun, and we need to make young people realise that it matters to them and that it can change things. And, you know, frankly, by electing a non-Tory here, I think that would be a really good start, because I think that would be really exciting for them to see something different that they've never seen. And student debt, yeah, personally, I think that, okay, it's a tricky one for a Lib Dem, I'll admit that. I think it's absolutely wrong that students are paying 7-point-something% interest on their student debt. And, you know, I can see my daughter's student debt statement, you know, gets bigger every year, even though she's already paying it off because she's got a job. I think it's probably right that students borrow money to pay the fees to get through university and then pay it back. I don't think they should pay a penny interest. I think we should find a way so that they pay back what they've borrowed over the next 20 years from if they're earning over a certain threshold, as it is at the moment. But I think it's absolutely criminal that those interest rates are so high that they can never touch the debt and they'll never be free of it. I think it's just wrong.
Thank you, Caroline. Robert.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I mentioned earlier on with UBI is it really speaks to the young, the people at the beginning of their careers, puts money in their pockets. In terms of student debt, I was just checking the 2019 manifesto. I'm fairly certain, I must say, that this game is sort of manifesto mastermind. You know, I'm probably going to get one or two things wrong, but I'm fairly certain that, you know, we would replace student loans with going back to grants, wiping off student loan debt, to check the detail of that, but we want to go back to an old system of grants. Not, I'm getting a nod from the front row. In terms of engaging young people, I think one of the problems is politics has just been so amorphous over the last several years. I don't know how many of you remember a restaurant chain called Ooze that opened about 10 years ago in London and closed again about 10 years ago, not just because the name was awful, but just because it did risotto. And I think what people have been faced with for many decades is political risotto, Labour-flavoured risotto, Conservative-flavoured risotto, Lib Dem-flavoured risotto, but it's all risotto and you get very, very sick of it. The Green Party approach I see it as being fundamentally different from the Lib Dems. I mean, pasta. So some kind of ultra-processed sort of false steak or something, I don't know. But the idea we're the only party that is saying you don't have to chase GDP growth. In fact, it's madness on a planet with finite resources. Every other, and this is the kind of language and idea that will grab new people and young people. And I go out to schools as well, and I've spoken to students. The idea that this old model of politics, as though growing the economy is the way that will get us out of every problem, it is not. It is not a rising tide that raises all boats. GDP growth, the majority of it, goes to the rich, which is why I really want to grab the young with the idea of UBI, which, unlike guaranteed basic income, doesn't add to the benefit system, it takes it away. It doesn't have more people filling in self-assessment forms. Yes, Rishi Sunak will get UBI, but it will be taken away from him and more through the tax system. People earning less than about £50,000, they'll be better off. Okay, less about young people, but these are the kind of ideas that grab them.
Thank you very much. I think there's a question over there. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Put your hand up, and then where was the next?
This lady in the front here, that's in the London line. I think that will be the last. Well, we're very conscious, I think, in Totnes that we are actually citizens of the world as well. And I'd got a question about international affairs, which is in two parts, really. And the first is, having been involved in the Make Polluters Pay, there is now a mechanism by which we can transfer funds to those countries who are really suffering under climate breakdown. So how do you see that? What sort of priority is that for you? And the other thing is thinking of peace and the situation, which is just terrible to contemplate. But it does start in communities. So is there any way that either of you have thought of, considered about helping to encourage peacemaking and deep conversations and the sort of thing that flows from that in our local areas?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Robert, start us off with that.
Yeah, but there's an awful lot to unpack there, but the idea of being citizens of the world is very central to the Green agenda. And, there is an ideal which, we're a long way from achieving, of a world without borders, where people can choose where they live. Citizenship comes from where you live rather than where you were born. A lot of the conflict that we're seeing in the world at the moment comes from resource scarcity and a minority of people having, the majority of the resources. So, yes, resources need to be spread round. We need to work to have a more evenly distributed world. That sort of idea of Gandhi's of there's enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. That there is a line in the Green Party policies, which I've sort of written on my notes, which says, peace is more than an absence of war. Peace is an active process that requires openness, honesty, mutual respect, understanding, solidarity, justice, and goodwill. And as a principle to live to and work to, I think that is absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's so powerful with me that I, rather than sort of summarizing it, I just copied and pasted it in here. So, and thank you for the opportunity for giving me to be able to read that out, because it is a powerful thought.
Thank you, Robert. Caroline.
Yes, so the Liberal Democrat Party is an internationalist party at heart. We very much believe in international cooperation. We would raise the, go back to the, I think it's 0.7% of GDP as international aid, and focus, we would like to focus international aid payments on environmental projects to help countries be more sustainable with their food, and to help especially countries that are more susceptible to the effects of the climate emergency. And in terms of peace, it's something that we see all the time in this community. I'm absolutely blown away by what happens in Totnes, and the Parents for Peace at the moment. The sort of just the sustained presence they have, campaigning for peace in Palestine, and it is our policy. We've called since November for an immediate bilateral ceasefire in Palestine. One of our MPs is the only MP in the House of Commons of Palestinian descent. One of her two parents is Palestinian, the other is English, and I can never remember which way around it is. I think her mother's Palestinian. She's been out there to visit Gaza. Our party leader was out last week in Israel. He wasn't allowed into Gaza, but he visited the West Bank and Jerusalem, spoke to lots of Israelis who are against the war and who want peace, spoke to aid organizations and UN bodies out there. We are speaking out about it as much as we can to try and move the government in its position. I think probably there are other communities elsewhere in the country where it's more important to do the work on the ground, where you have maybe a more mixed community and more tension between communities. I mean, I think we're really blessed here that we don't have that kind of tension, and that we are pretty open-minded in Totnes, and everybody's welcome. It's absolutely fundamental.
Thank you, Caroline. And we've got one more question, which I think is coming from this person here in the front. Yes, thank you. Hold on, microphone on it. Oh, sorry.
And then we've got a little bit of
Okay.
leeway because we.
Okay, well, we're going to have one more than you.
Okay.
Well, then.
Being that I have a son who, if he came to live here, which he probably will soon, hasn't got a hope in hell of even getting a room because of second homeowners and Airbnb, what are the policies of each of the two candidates?
Thank you. Caroline. Very, very pertinent question for this constituency.
Yeah, I often say that I think housing is actually the most important issue in this constituency, because it has a knock-on effect on so many other things. It's not just about housing. I mean, obviously it is about housing and providing homes, but it's also about our schools, our public services, our businesses who can't find employees, can't find staff, we can't find carers. The schools struggle to get teachers because you can't afford anywhere to live near Kingsbridge on a teacher's salary. I mean, it's just absolutely dire. Last week, I had a look on Rightmove for Brixham, which is a big part of this constituency. There were over 1,000. I had a look on Airbnb and Rightmove. There were over 1,000 properties on Airbnb, and there were 9 on Rightmove. And that's anything from 1 bedroom to a house, so that's flats. There's probably 2 or 3. It's absolutely appalling. So we have a huge housing policy, which obviously I can't cover completely, but we would build more than 150,000 social houses a year. We would give councils the right to end the right to buy legislation in their area if they wanted to, because one of the problems we have is that the Liberal Democrat controlled South Hams District Council would love to build council houses, but if you do that at the moment, then 3 years after you build them, they can be bought by the people living in them, and then you have no council houses, then you have to start again. So that has to go. We would get on with banning no fault evictions, which the Conservative Party keeps procrastinating about for obvious reasons. More rights for renters in the private sector, better new home standards so that all new homes built are built as zero carbon homes, which, just to say, that was a policy that was brought in the coalition. And in 2016, after we left the government, the Conservative Party came under quite serious pressure from Persimmon Homes, one of the big housing developers, to drop that policy because they wouldn't be able to make enough profit if they had to put solar panels on houses. So they decided to shelve that. So there have been 16 housing ministers in 14 years, which just shows the...
Do you start wrapping this up?
Sorry. So basically, massive problem. I would have much stricter legislation on Airbnbs, and I'd really like to revisit the second home problem. I think absolutely, we need limits, and we need limits that are a lot lower than what we currently have. I don't quite know how you put that genie back in the bottle, but we need to find a way.
Thank you, Caroline. Robert?
Yeah, I mean, on the second home issue itself, I don't know whether the Green Party would limit it, but certainly what we wouldn't do is incentivize people to turn homes into Airbnbs. I mean, we say that everyone has an equal right to food, water, warmth and housing, and not just any housing. One of the problems this country has is housing that is leakier and damper than anywhere else in Europe. And, you know, that costs money. It creates health problems. So one of the things that we've committed to is £145 billion investment over 10 years to insulate homes, and we'd be looking at the worst quality homes of people, you know, lower down the income strata. First of all, they'd get priority rather than the rich. We do have I hesitate to say a house building target, but a house creation target of 150,000 a year. I say creation because one of the focuses of the Green Party is to bring back derelict houses, repair buildings, get them back into to usage rather than digging up green fields and putting lots of little brick boxes there. Because, you know, remember, the Green Party look at every decision through the lens of what brings greater quality of life rather than profit or shareholder return. So, you know, we will not be supporting a world in which developers simply land bank and then put up houses on greenfield sites, the size and shape of house that brings them greatest profit. That is not how the Green Party do things. Every decision that happens in the public sphere has to be looked through the lens of what improves quality of life, not material wealth.
Thank you, Robert. Anthea tells me we've got time for one very quick question and two very quick answers to it. So we're going to speed through this, and it's this person here in the front. Thank you.
Hi there. Just building on that last question, somebody stole a little bit of my thunder. How would the candidates and their party ensure that any development, whether it's for housing or for commercial uses or for energy, actually meets the needs of all the stakeholders rather than just making profits for the individual developers?
Robert,
and as an example, I'm thinking about the Dairy Crest site, Totnes.
Robert, very quick.
Yeah. Well, as I say, you know, every decision that is made under a green flag is done looking at quality of life and looking at all the costs, the environmental costs. So one of the things that we wouldn't be doing is putting up houses in isolation without looking at infrastructure and, you know, facilities, making sure facilities, or at least trying to make sure facilities are available within a walk or a cycle away, rather than people having to get in their cars and go and buy a pint of milk. You know, ironic, we're talking about an ex-dairy site. I mean, another point is that we'd be looking at pushing the decision making down as far as possible. So these are decisions more for local councillors than MPs.
Thank you, Robert. Caroline, very quick.
Yeah, just very briefly, we are in favour of a community-led planning policy rather than a developer-led planning policy, and we feel that every planning decision should be made by the local community for the local community, and it's about more than building housing estates, it's about building communities. I mean, absolutely, as Robert says, it's about building communities that are pleasant to live in and that work and that have facilities and services and you know, all of that. In a perfect world, yeah, that's what we would. And Atmos, yes, please, green light. Let's get Atmos built.
So thank you very much for fantastic questions. You all did exactly as I asked, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you to the two candidates for good, punchy and concise answers as well. They now each have 1 minute to summarize why they are the best person to evict the Tory. And then we're going to go to Anthea, who's going to explain the process of voting. So off you go, starting with Robert.
Right. You guys are facing something of a paradox. In deciding for whom to vote tactically, it is really important that you don't vote tactically. In deciding what you collectively think, you should be voting as individuals. And if what I've said chimes with you about making decisions always through the lens of what improves quality of life rather than material wealth, about having the political will to put a meaningful wealth tax that brings up to £46 billion with the other elements I spoke about, then please vote Green. Please vote for me as people's champion. If it turns out that you and I are in the minority and the majority of people want to go Liberal Democrat or Labour, then I will completely understand when you hold your nose and vote that way in the general election. But when the general election is over and the dust has settled, if what I've said has landed with you in a positive way, then maybe come and explore the Greens, come and join us, come and campaign for us. Maybe next time it might be you sitting up here instead of me.
Thank you very much, Robert. And final statement from Caroline.
Thank you. Robert has brilliantly talked about green policies this afternoon, and I think we all know an awful lot about what the Green Party stand for. What he hasn't done is given you any indication of how he's going to win this election. And I need you to be really focused and think about what it takes to win an election in a constituency that is approximately 900 square miles. There are 6 towns. I have spent a year building 6 campaign teams: Kingsbridge, Paignton, South Brent, Totnes, Brixham, Modbury. We have a whole new patch that has come into the constituency. It's a massive task, and I am out there all day, every day, 7 days a week trying to win this election, because I do not want to be standing there on election night on that platform beside Anthony Mangnall's smug face because he has won this election by 1,000 votes. Okay, I want you all to visualize how that will feel for you and for me. We can do this. We can change 100 years of Conservative MPs in this area, but we have to be strategic. And I know that the Liberal Democrats have put so much already into this election. We believe we can win it. We know we can win it. And, you know, my values are really not that different to Robert's values. And, you know, we have to be clever. We have to vote together. Vote Lib Dem, back me in the primary.
Thank you very much to both our present candidates. I have to remind you to bear in mind the unseen presence at every one of these primary meetings, which is the Labour candidate, also when they do in fact field a candidate. But anyway, Labour are in the running, so don't forget that also when it comes to voting. And Anthony is now going to explain the process.
Just before I do, you've been part of something historic. You're going to talk to some friends and they're going to think, what the hell was I doing not getting a ticket to this thing? Well, it's not over, because we've still got a number of events running. You've got 6 more to come. Spaces at Paignton this week, spaces at Modbury. Get your people there. You can't go again. You've had your go. But get all those people who have not yet taken part in this fantastic community democracy exercise, which is absolutely groundbreaking. We want you to be able to look up on Newsnight when they say, oh my goodness, something extraordinary has happened in South Devon. And you can say, I was there and I helped make it happen. So just on voting, You're going to be released by the stewards front row in rows at a time to manage it. You're going to go to the rear. You're going to be given a voting slip which will be stamped to be validated. And then you will be asked to rank the candidates in order of preference, 1 being your favourite. So it's 1, 2, and 3. And then fold your slip in half, post it in the box, take all your personal belongings with you now because you will not be allowed back into the hall. I'm sorry, we're being really strict about this because we want to make the voting process absolutely tight so that nobody can say, oh, you know, there's people voted twice and blah, blah. And then we got a whole queue of people who couldn't get into the room because you were smart enough to book a ticket early, and they're waiting to come and vote. So thank you all very, very much. You should be very proud of yourselves. Well done.
Thank you, everyone. Special thanks to Anthea, Ben, and Simon for organising and founding this campaign. And for the tech team for carrying out a very difficult task live, and for all the people on the floor moving the microphones around and doing all the logistical work surrounding this meeting. Thank you very much. And for our 2 very sporting candidates. And to you all for being part of something very special indeed here. Thank you.